Good morning, 3rd and 4th grade. I understand you've been learning about King Josiah, and this comes from, as you know, a children's Bible, and you will find out a lot more detail about this boy king. So why don't we start learning? 8-year-old Josiah was a little boy king, as Joash had been. Unlike little Joash, Josiah did not have to be kept hidden and guarded. Nobody wanted to kill little Josiah. Everyone wanted him to be king. He was of David's line, the direct heir to the throne. The whole nation of Judah crowned Josiah king. They all watched over the safety of their little boy king. Although Josiah was just a young child, he proved that even a child can trust and serve God. He tried to do what was right, even at the very beginning of his reign. As he grew up, he began to clear out of Jerusalem all the idol images and the altars of heathen gods. Josiah stood and watched his men, directing them as they worked. He had them break down the metal and carved images of Baal and grind them into little pieces, scattering the dust on the graves of those who had worshipped them. Josiah even went through the cities of Israel to destroy their idols. There had been no king in Israel since the people had been carried away. When Josiah visited the Israelite cities, he took workmen along with heavy axes and hammers. Wherever they found any idols or heathen altars, the men smashed them to pieces and ground them to powder. After all the idols had been destroyed, Josiah sent skilled workmen to repair the temple. It needed a lot of repair, for it had been neglected for many years. While the men were working in the temple, Hilkiah, the high priest, found an old book hidden away in a corner. He was very much interested in what this book could be. He showed it to one of the other priests. When they read the book, they found that it was the law of Moses. They showed this book to the king. The priest read to Josiah the words which Moses had written long ago. If this was not the same book that Moses had written, it was an exact copy. 600 years had passed since Moses wrote his book and put it in the Holy of Holies beside the ark. That first book may have become worn out, for Moses commanded the priest to take the book out of the Holy of Holies every 7 years and read it to the people. Good King Jehoshaphat had sent teachers throughout his kingdom to teach the people of the law of the Lord. Each of these teachers had carried with him a copy of the book of the law, which some careful priest had copied from the original book in the Holy of Holies. More than 200 years had passed since that day. The custom of reading the law aloud to the people every 7 years had been neglected. The people had broken God's law continually, partly because they had wicked hearts and did not wish to obey, but also partly because they were ignorant of what God had commanded. Josiah himself had never heard the law read. For the first time now, he heard those terrible judgments that would come upon the children of Israel if they turned away from God and trusted idols instead. The Bible told them that the Lord will send upon you trouble in everything you set your hand to do, until you are destroyed and perish quickly because of the wickedness of your doings. A nation which you do not know shall eat up the fruit of your land and of all your labors. You will carry much seed into the field and gather little in. You will have sons and daughters, but not enjoy them, for they will go into captivity. You will be an astonishment and a proverb and a byword among all the nations, because you did not serve the Lord. When Josiah heard these words and realized that his people had broken all God's commandments, he tore his clothes in sorrow and in fear. He sent the priest to ask God about these judgments. Isaiah the prophet had been dead for a long time. His place had been taken by a prophetess, a woman named Huldah. Josiah's messengers went to her. When they told her what they had come for, she said to them, "Thus saith the Lord, tell the man that sent you to me, behold, I will bring upon this place and the people living in it all these things which are written in the book which you have read to the king of Judah. They have forsaken me and worshipped other gods. As for the king of Judah, who sent you to me, say to him, because you humbled yourself before me when you heard these words, and you wept in sorrow before me, behold, I have heard you. You shall come to your grave in peace, and shall not see the evil which I will bring upon this place, and upon the people that live here." So the messengers brought this word back to the king. Then Josiah called a great meeting of all the people, both young and old. He read to them the words of the book which had been found in the temple. Then King Josiah stood up before his people and made a solemn promise to serve the Lord. He made the people promise that they too would serve the Lord. Part 2. King Josiah determined to destroy thoroughly all the idols in the land, even more completely than he had done before. He made the priests bring out of God's holy temple all the dishes that had been made for the idol Baal, and for the worship of the sun, and the moon, and the stars. Josiah had these dishes burned, and their ashes carried away. He had the houses of the witches pulled down, so that nobody could go consult these people. It was one of God's commandments that there should be no witches, no fortune tellers among his people. Then King Josiah went to a terrible place called Tophet. This was the valley where the people sacrificed their little children to the idol Moloch. By filling this valley with filth, King Josiah made it such a vile place that no one would ever go there again to worship Moloch. Near God's temple in Jerusalem were some fine horses which had been given to the sun god when Judah worshipped idols. King Josiah drove the horses away and burned the sun god's chariots with fire. On the Mount of Olives, across from Jerusalem, there were still standing some of the altars King Solomon had built for his heathen wives. These altars had been there for 300 years. King Josiah broke them all down. He burned dead men's bones on the altars, so that nobody would ever sacrifice there again. He went to Bethel, where there was still left one of the golden calves King Jeroboam had set up. As King Josiah was standing in the graveyard at Bethel, directing his men to dig up men's bones to burn on the heathen altars, he saw a grave on the hillside with some writing on it. "What writing is this that I see on that stone?" he asked. The men answered, "That is the grave of a prophet who lived 300 years ago, and who foretold these things which you have done to these heathen altars." This was true. 300 years before, when King Jeroboam first made this altar for the worship of the golden calf, a prophet had told him that a king named Josiah, of David's family, would someday burn men's bones on that altar. Josiah killed all the heathen priests that were in his kingdom and burned their bones on heathen altars, to make these altars unclean, so that no one would ever offer sacrifices on them again. For the Israelites believed that any contact with a dead body made a person unclean and no longer fit to worship God. If all the kings of Judah had been like Josiah, there would have been no idolatry in the land. He turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might. He tried to live in every way according to the law of God. Because Josiah trusted God, God postponed the punishment that was coming to Judah for its wickedness. That punishment was surely coming, though. Josiah was the last actual king of Judah. At the end of Josiah's life, Necho, king of Egypt, passed through Judah on his way to fight against the king of Assyria. At that time, Assyria and Egypt were the two greatest countries of the world. They were always fighting each other. They were always fighting each other, and their armies always passed through Palestine because the land of the Israelites lay between them. King Josiah wanted to fight against the Egyptian king. He called his army together and got ready for battle. But Necho sent word to Josiah, "I did not come to fight with you. I only want to pass through your country to fight against my enemy, the king of Assyria. God has commanded me to fight against the Assyrians and to do it quickly. Let me alone to do what God has commanded." But Josiah was determined to fight the king of Egypt. He disguised himself in the clothes of an ordinary soldier and went out to fight against the Egyptian army. In the battle, he was wounded. Sorrowfully, his servants carried the wounded king back to Jerusalem, where he died. All Judah and Jerusalem mourned for good King Josiah. The men and women sang sad songs of affection for their beloved king. Jeremiah the prophet mourned him too. The people wanted Josiah's second son, Jehoahaz, to be king. The priests anointed him with oil to be ruler in his father's place.